Hello guys, and in this lesson I want us to consider API response codes. So currently we are returning data and that data does not have any status, whether there was an error, whether the data that we sent was created, was updated. Currently we're just returning data the way it is, which is not a good API practice. So we need to understand about API codes and the codes to return at specific situation. Maybe there was an error, what code should you return here? And we're just going to look a couple of them because you need around 10 of them and then that is it. And once you understand how to use this, then you're good. So let us jump in and see how to do this. So the first one, of course, is the 200 API response. So when an API returns 200, it means that it is okay and there was success in the API. So this is the default response. So if you don't use any other response code, all your APIs will return this 200. Whether there was an error or whether there was, there was not an error, it will return 200. So you need to customize so that the user gets the correct response. Then we have 201, which means created. So for example, if you create something in the API, a resource in the API, you need to return 201 so that the user can know that the resource has been successfully created. And then we have 204, which means no content, which basically signifies that an action was successfully but no content was returned. In the case of maybe you delete an item, you're not returning any data to the user, so you lose 204. Then we have 400, maybe there was a bad request, or maybe there was a request which was not required. Maybe someone is trying to, to just maliciously access the server. You can also return things like 400. We have 401, which means unauthorized. It means the user is unauthenticated to access the resource. So the user maybe hasn't logged in, or the user has been denied some privileges to access some resource and is trying to access that resource, then you can use for one to return that status. Then we have for three, which means forbidden, is more of a user is unauthenticated and is not allowed to access the resource. So for example, you can use for three to restrict the admin. So anyone who is not an admin and tries to access the admin page, you can throw the for three status code. Then we have for four, which means that the requested resource was not found. If a user tries to access maybe a file or a page which is not there, and then you can return a 404 status code. And lastly, we have 500, which signify internal server error. For example, there was an error in the database, there was an error in the code. You don't want to return that error to the user because that might be a security issue. So you want to return 500. And then the user maybe can let the developers know that he was facing an issue, and then the developers can check it out. So the use case, the way you use it in your code is that you just call response JSON and then you pass the data as the first parameter and then the code as the last parameter. So let us dive in and see how to use this response in our code. So I've pulled my code up here and then now I'll start with the product controller. So the product controller, I'll go here. When we return all products in this index, we just want to return 200, which means okay. Later on, we'll be able to see in clarity how to handle and to get any errors and return errors in a more formatted and customized manner. But for now, let us just handle the response code. So as you have seen, I'll use response. All right, response like this, and then I'll call JSON. I'll say JSON, and then of course this JSON, the first guy needs to be the data and then the response code. So I can copy this guy, I can move him there, and then I'll use a comma now, and then of course now the response code is 200 like that, and that is it. We are done with that. So let me just do this. That is it. So when I go to the store here, what happens here is that when the data has been created, I need to return to a one because to one is the one which represents that the data has been created. So I can just do this. Then I can say that the data, so I'm going just to cut this here, move it here. and then the response code is going to be 201, which signifies that the data has been created on the server successfully. On the show here, I can just return 200 for now, response, then need to say JSON, of course. Then here on the JSON, I can just return 200 and then I can move my guy here. So on the update here, I can say response, JSON, then I'll just move my guy here, then need to return 200 just for now. And then lastly on destroy, here on destroy, of course, we are returning no content, but we are showing the user that the action was successful. So say response, JSON, and then for now I return, I need to return 204, not 200. 204 to show that I'm not returning any content, but the action was successful. And that is it for now. 200 on getting data, 201 on storing data, 200 on update, and 204 on deleting. So I'll do the same very quickly on user. So let me just pause and then update. So I have updated the user. So now let us do a couple of tests here. So I'll pull up PHP. I'll pull up this HTTP client. Let us first get a user and see. So I'll get a user, 8,000, API, users. Let us run this. So yeah, for the user, when I run and get all the users, as you can see, the response code is 200. Let us try to create a user. Let's try and say API users, but let us say this is, okay, let us just add request, post text body. So we go to 8,000. And this will be API users. And then in the body, I need name, believe I need name, email, password. So I just say the name is going to be maybe, just say test. And then the email will be test@gmail.com. The password will be test1234, like that. And then we are good. So let me try to pause this data and see. Okay, pause data here. As you can see, when I pause the data, this is it returns 2-1 created, and that is what we want. And the data has been created here. Let us add another request for the update and see. So I'm going to use patch, or let us use patch, and I'm going to update the user with ID. The user that we have just created, this is ID 11. So API users. So I'll just copy this data here. Let me see. I'll just copy this data here like this. Go inside here. I'll paste that guy here. I'll see. Let me just remove this name, email. Let us say the name, email will be test updated, and the email will be test updated like this, and that will be fine for now. And then let us run this and see. I need to provide the ID for the user that I'm updating. I've just sent like this. So I need to provide the ID here. The ID that I want to update, the user is 11. I had forgotten to add the password and I was validating the password. So when I run this, as you can see, our user has been updated, test updated at Gmail, and that is it. And let us lastly try to delete, the user, this user 11. And as you can see, let me just scroll up and you can see the HTTP request is 200, or rather the response is 200, the HTTP response code. Lastly, I'll add a delete a delete request here, and I'm going 1000 API users. It should be users like this. I'm going /11. The API that, or rather the user that I want to delete is 11. And then we don't need to pass anybody. I'll run this, run this. Let's see. As you can see, it returns to a 4 no content, and that is to mean that the user has been deleted successfully and there is nothing to return. So now if we try to get this user, for example, if I try to get this user 11, this will throw an error, and because the user doesn't exist now, we have deleted him. So if I run this, as you can see, it throws an error. It tells me no query result for model of this user. But later on in the next module, we'll be able to look how to customize, validation error so that they can become more meaningful. But for now, this is what I'm getting. And this is it poses big security issues. For this lesson, that is it. I hope you have been able to understand how to use response codes to return, the status of your API request.